how did you get the expertise to be the chief technology officer of a rocket ship company?
I do have a physics background. That's helpful as a foundation. And then I read a lot of books and talked to a lot of smart people.
I think my sort of drive to get it done is somewhat disconnected from hope, enthusiasm, or anything else. I actually just don't care about hope or enthusiasm or motivation. I just give it everything I've got, irrespective of what the circumstances may be. You just keep going and get it done.
I think also people tend to overweight risk on a personal level. It's one thing if you've got, a mortgage to pay and kids to support, and that if you were to deviate from your job, how are you going to feed your family and pay the rent? And okay, that's understandable. But let's say you're young and you're just coming out of college or coming out of high school or whatever. What do you risk? You're not going to starve. I mean, it's really certainly not in any kind of modern economy. It's so easy to earn enough money just to live somewhere and eat food. So I don't know what are they afraid of. They're mostly afraid of failure, I think. But people should be less risk averse when there's not much at risk.
I always had sort of a slight existential crisis because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward.
What drives you? What is it that when you wake up in the morning, do you see a problem and you want to solve it?
I think the thing that drives me is that I want to be able to think about the future and feel good about that. We're doing what we can to have the future be as good as possible, to be inspired by what is likely to happen, and to look forward to the next day. That's what really drives me is trying to figure out how to make sure that things are great and going to be so, and that's the underlying principle behind Tesla and SpaceX. I think particularly for Americans, think about America is a nation of explorers. People came here from other parts of the world, chose to give up the known in favor of the unknown. So I think exploration, I think the United States is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration.
I mean, I thought both Tesla and SpaceX would fail at the beginning.
You saw it?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Of course.
But nevertheless, you put all your money in that.
I expected to lose it. Well, technically, what I thought was, I'll take half the money from PayPal, and if I lose half of it, that's okay. But then, of course, the companies encounter difficulties, and then have a choice of either let the company die, or put all the money into the companies. And so I really didn't want the companies to die, so I put all the money in the companies. And then I had to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses.
To find a great chief engineer for the rocket, but the good chief engineers wouldn't join, and the bad ones, there was no point in hiring them. So I ended up being chief engineer of the rocket.
But Flight 4 was flawless. In Musk's world, it lit the darkness.
When critics say you can't do this, your answer to them is,
we've done it.
And then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week. If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that you will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. Work hard, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as them.
I think it's important that humanity become a multi-planet species. I think most people would agree that a future where we're a space-faring civilization is inspiring and exciting compared with one where we are forever confined to Earth until some eventual extinction event. That's really why I started SpaceX.
The biggest issue I see with so-called AI experts is that they know more and they think they're smarter than they actually are. In general, we are all much smarter than we think we are, but much less smart, dumber than we think we are, by a lot. So this tends to plague smart people. They just can't. They define themselves by their intelligence, and they don't like the idea that a machine could be way smarter than them, so they discount the idea, which is fundamentally flawed. That's the wishful thinking situation. I'm really quite close to, I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. You can see this in things like AlphaGo, which went from, in the span of maybe 6 to 9 months, it went from being unable to beat even a reasonably good Go player to then beating the European world champion, who was ranked 600, then beating Lisa Doll 4-5, who had been world champion for many years, then beating the current world champion, then beating everyone while playing simultaneously. Then there was AlphaZero, which crushed AlphaGo 100-0. And AlphaZero just learned by playing itself, and it can play basically any game that you put the rules in for. Whatever rules you give it, you literally read the rules, play the game, and be superhuman. For any game. Nobody expected that rate of improvement. If you ask those same experts who think AI is not progressing at the rate that I'm saying, I think you will find that their predictions for things like Go and other AI advancements have their batting average is quite weak. It's not good. We'll see this also with self-driving. I think probably by end of next year, self-driving will encompass essentially all modes of driving and be at least 100 to 200% safer than a person by the end of next year. We're talking like maybe 18 months from now. NHTSA did a study on Tesla's Autopilot version 1, which is relatively primitive, and found that it was a 45% reduction in highway accidents. And that's despite Autopilot 1 being just version 1. Version 2, I think, will be at least 2 or 3 times better. That's the current version that's running right now. So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that, because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
Did you expect them to cheer you on?
So they're hoping they would.
What are you trying to prove to them?
What I'm trying to do is to make a significant difference in spaceflight and help make spaceflight accessible to almost anyone.
One of the most difficult choices I've ever faced in life was in 2008. I think I had maybe $30 million left, or $30 or $40 million left in 2008. I had two choices. I could put it all into one company, and then the other company would definitely die, or split it between the two companies. But if I split it between the two companies, then both might die. When you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, or building something, it's like a child. And so it's like, which one am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split the money between the two. fortunately, thank goodness, they both came through.
What was your biggest failure, and how did it change you?
Well, there's a ton of failures along the way, that's for sure. Like, so as I said, for SpaceX, the first 3 launches failed. And we're just barely able to scrape together enough parts and money to do the 4th launch. If that 4th launch had failed, we would have been dead. So multiple failures along the way. I tried very hard to get the right expertise in for SpaceX. I tried hard to find a great chief engineer for the rocket, but the good chief engineers wouldn't join, and the bad ones, well, there was no point in hiring them. So I ended up being chief engineer of the rocket. So if I could have found somebody better, then we would have maybe had less than 3 failures.
That 3rd failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up.
So many people tried to talk me out of starting a rocket company. It was crazy. One good friend of mine collected a whole series of videos of rockets blowing up and made me watch those. He just didn't want me to lose all my money. We're doing these things that seem unlikely to succeed, and we've been fortunate, and at least thus far they have succeeded. Now is the time to take risk. You don't have kids. As you get older, your obligations increase. And once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
How did you figure you were going to start a car company and be successful at it?
Well, I didn't really think Tesla would be successful. I thought we would most likely fail. But I thought that we at least could address the false perception that people had that an electric car had to be ugly and slow and boring like a golf cart.
But you say you didn't expect the company to be successful, then why try?
If something's important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure.
Or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear. I think about what technology solution is necessary in order to achieve the particular goal, and then try to make as much progress in that direction as possible. I think being a multi-planet species and being out there among the stars is important for the long-term survival of humanity, and that's one reason. But then the part that I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure, and it makes people excited about the future. If you consider 2 futures, one where we are forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system, I think that second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring, and there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living. When my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA. And we're so hot up, we had one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. Whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to. And if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think.
You just wanted to get people interested in space again?
Yes, yes.
Capture the imagination?
Yes, that was the idea.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
To see that because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
When you had that third failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever